Okay, in this video we're going to be applying color to our Grisaille stage for our second Grisaille study. We're going to do it a little bit differently. In the last one, the drapery study, I did the background first and then jumped into the main subjects. It really doesn't matter either way because your early stages are always kind of an approximation. You know, just like getting the value correct, color interacts visually with its environment, and so nailing the color perfectly likewise is always going to be pretty tricky. So between color and value, it's always good to go for approximations at the early stages, like I've talked about before, and then slowly sort of build in greater and greater accuracy and detail. I also want to talk about adding liquid to your paint at this stage. So far we've just been using turpenoid to thin our paints, but liquid is a gel medium that we can add to our paint. It does many things, and I'll talk about the other things more in the future. But generally speaking, what it will do for us is it'll speed up the drying of our paint. All right, so instead of sitting around waiting for days, possibly a week or two for it to dry, it'll pretty much be dry within 24 hours by adding it to it. Like I say, there's a lot more to do with liquid, and I'll cover mediums later, but right now we're just going to get started. So I've got a dollop of liquid on my palette. That's actually probably too much. You don't need that much. All we're going to do is when we mix our colors is we're going to take a little bit of that and mix it into it. So it's always kind of good to spread it out so you have kind of a line of it. So if you come to get some more liquid, you can always get some clean stuff. If it's a blob, the colors get mixed into the liquid pretty much. And what I have on my brush right now, that's plenty for these first stages of the painting. Okay, so if we look at the refer to the image of the bottle. It's a brown bottle, and you should be familiar right now with a particular type of brown, one we've been using called burnt sienna, which is here. And this is a good starting brown for that particular bottle. So what I'm going to do is literally paint over everything we've already done, because we don't want to paint around details and all this stuff. This was the Grisaille stage, and part of that was just to get you to learn to see these things. Now that you've done it, now that you've seen it, we'll just do it again. Be a little bit easier the second time around, but don't try and paint all these different pieces. Just go over the entire thing again. Now don't use too much liquid, so I'll show you what I mean. If I have a lot of liquid on here and I go over it, it's pretty much just transparent, or somewhere in between. Traditionally, they did use transparent paints, but we're not using transparent layers, mostly for time reasons. Takes a long time to make a painting using transparent layers because you have to let it dry 24 hours in between. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm literally covering up all my work. Don't make it too transparent like I'm kind of doing here. Just let it be opaque. Okay, so there's the base of the burnt sienna color down there. I didn't go all the way to the bottom because I'm actually going to change color slightly. So I'm simplifying it. I'm not doing the whole thing the same brown. I'm going to have this be darker. But as I come down here, you'll notice in the image it's a little bit lighter. Okay, and the last thing we want to do is add white, just pure white to our paint, because it's going to make this kind of pale chocolate dull color. If you could refer to the picture, it's kind of more golden, a little bit more yellow in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to use cadmium yellow medium because it's slightly orange already. Now, a big thing you'll notice using color in this class is that what a color looks like on your palette and what a color looks like on your painting can be two different things. So I'm just going to test that out there. And that's a little bit too orange, a little bit too strong. So I'm going to get a little bit more of the brown in here. And I'm going to do that just on the edge here. And if it is a bit strong, don't worry, because I know that I'm going to mix it in. So I've kind of added a little bit more paint to it. Burnt sienna to it. But I know that the orange that I have showing up on here is going to mix with the burnt sienna also. So that's another thing, is that you don't always want to mix up the perfect color on your palette, because if you're working wet on wet, you're going to get, the paint's going to change color as it mixes with what's already there. So Now you'll find when in this first layer, the gray will come through with if your brush strokes are too hard in places, okay? So you want to paint really kind of gingerly and know that you're actually going to do this twice, right? You're going to come over this twice. So I know there's a light area here. It gets a little bit kind of dark here. And I pick up a little bit more light here. So I'm just going to come in and lay that in. Not too light. And we're not going for detail. We're keeping it very simple, a lot like the three-tone method we did at the very beginning. Now I'm going to switch, and I'm going to go to my dark. Now it's a brown glass, and there's a blue table behind it. One of the most logical ways of approaching that color is not to add black to that color, but to combine the blue and the glass. So we'll take some of the burnt sienna. We'll take a little bit, I'm going to try ultramarine blue this time. Sometimes it's just a matter of, seeing what happens when you add maybe a different blue or a different red to get what you want. If I add the phthalo blue, it has yellow in it, so it might have a slightly more of a green cast. I don't know that I want that. I'll take a little bit more liquid into the mix here, and then just make a mark, just have a look at it. And I can see that that's still too light. So I'm going to go for more blue in here. And again, I am covering up all of my details that are there and just painting right up to that line. It's important you don't leave any of the gray showing through. And where the gray is showing through, like there, I'll come back over that. Well, maybe I'll just stick it up there, just change the shape of that reflection just a little bit. And so because this is a linear style, I do want you to be very careful. So pressing against the canvas with your brush and letting the hairs spread out, and then using that resistance to help create a straight line is very, very useful. Okay. And like I explained before, it's a little tricky filming these things because the light hits it in such a way that I can't really see what I'm doing sometimes, but I'll just move around from different, because the oil is highly reflective. A little bit of a mistake down there, but it doesn't matter. All right, so there's our dark. Now I have this dark on my brush, so it kind of makes sense that I might come in and start to do just a little bit more on the painting. So I know that my neck of the bottle has some dark. So you see how light it goes because it's mixing with the paint that's already there. And that's okay. So I'm just going to establish kind of a darker region in here. And I could actually come in with my blue and just go right into the brown. And then I have kind of a darker region in here also. I'm going to spread that out. Again, I'm not going for details. I'm just getting general areas established. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for now. I'll come back to it in a second. I'm just going to work around it for a bit. So let's go to the blue of the table. So the blue is kind of a purpley blue, so we know a good place to start is with ultramarine. So I'm going to take a little bit of liquid, just take some pure ultramarine. Now you can see if you put it down, it's too dark, and in that case also too transparent. So we are going to have to add white to this. So I'm bringing white out here. Make a mark to see how it looks. And as an approximation, as a way of starting, that's completely fine. Okay, so I'm going to continue with this blue in here and just kind of put that down in the whole area. I'll get a little bit more blue in the mix, not so white. Make sure you clean your brush really well. It's not the end of the world, but the brown will actually dull the blue, and in the picture it's quite a strong blue. So let's get some more white. Now I'm going to move up here to my palette because you can see how the color is spread out on your palette. And I'm running out of space down there. So I'm going to stop this and then we'll just speed up the film for a bit. Okay, so that's kind of a base for the ground. Notice that I painted over the shadows. Shadows really benefit from being painted on top of the original color of the object. Unless you get them perfectly correct, then when you put them next to each other, they work. Otherwise, they do tend to look like they're cutouts. They don't quite fit the cloth. So I'm going to leave the blue table and the blue cloth as is, let it dry for a bit, and come over to the green of the pear. So we'll take our cadmium yellow light, which is slightly greenish, take a little bit of phthalo blue, that gives us a brighter green. And then again, just come over here and test it. That's a pretty bright green. We can add a bit of white in a minute and we can darken it, but again, like the bottle, I'm gonna have you just cover everything up. Let's take a little bit of liquid into the mix. There we go. Now that's pretty electric kind of green, and even though it is fairly bright, we do want to tone it down a little bit. So the opposite of green being red, I'm going to take a little bit of cadmium red, put it into the green, and that just kind of, you can see that slight browning of the color. There you go. You can see it next to it. And then just, or I could even take some of the cadmium and just mix it right into my green and then spread it in. And that just kind of takes the edge off that semi sort of chartreuse, fluorescent green almost quality. And like the bottle, I'm looking for something that's just an approximation, and I'm covering up all of the details. Again, I'm using the pressure to spread the hairs of the brush out to get my edges. And then coming, and I can see it's very, very yellow, so that's okay. I'm gonna just put some more blue in the mix here. And then I'm gonna make a darker green using the blue. And you can see how phthalo blue gets this very almost kind of electric-y kind of green. So I'm gonna switch over to a ultramarine blue and see how that gives you a kind of a duller, earthier green. And then still it's very green, very saturated. We're going to go with some more cadmium red, and that's going to brown it for us. So it's dulled it, but it's still fairly light, so we need more blues. A little bit more cadmium. It's going to give us this nice dark kind of green. That'll be okay for now. And then we'll just soften that edge. You won't do too much with it. I'll just put it in. And just soften. Now we're going to be putting more colors on top, so it doesn't really matter. We're just creating a base for what we're doing. And so the next step, I'm going to do the background, and we'll have all the basic colors blocked in.